And hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and today is new Springsteen kickoff day.
Yeah.
We're recording this a day early, but I'm going to be releasing this tomorrow, and I have the a an official city member. Did you Councilman, did you work on a gold a key to the city for Mr. Springsteen?
If I could, I would. But I don't think we do that. So that would be a little self-serving. You know what I mean? If obviously, if I could ever meet Bruce Springsteen, that would be an honor. But we'll see if that happens.
Good. So Louis Viera is a councilman in the Tampa area. You wrote a wonderful column about why it's a big deal that Bruce is coming to the city and is
Yeah.
starting his tour there, and that's how we connected. So before we get into that, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here, Jesse. It's funny connecting from Florida to Texas. I've been in Texas, was in Austin once. I'm also a big Willie Nelson fan, by the way. I love a lot of great Texas music. Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, big fan of Chris Christopherson. Lucas Nelson, who of course by virtue of Willie is from Texas.
Sure.
So always, and I'm a big Bob. This is politics. I love Lyndon Johnson. So there you
Yeah.
go. But no, but originally from my parents are originally from Cuba. We came here in 1960 as Cuban exiles, refugees, and I'm originally from the Tampa area, Temple Terrace. I came here when I was back here. My parents had been in and out of Tampa when I was about 9 or 10 months old or so, and lived here all my life. And I live in the new Tampa area, and I an attorney, been practicing for 19 years. And I'm married. I have a wonderful son who is 16 years old, and Bennett got elected to city council in 2016, and real pleasure to serve the people of Tampa. I always try to talk about things like job training, skilled trade apprenticeships, public safety for police and fire issues. Work a lot with our veterans, and a lot of issues, by the way, that are right out of a Bruce Springsteen song. So there you go. But that's all about me.
Yeah, it is interesting. I tell people that I'm a blueberry in a very strawberry patch state.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it is very odd living in Texas with
Yeah.
some of our elected officials. We'll leave it that. Uh, so, uh, well, that is awesome. Growing up, I always like to start at the beginning. Growing up, what kind of music did your family listen to?
That's a great question. So, it's kind of two-sided. My late grandfather, Modesto Suarez, his nickname was Appy. He loved music. He never really spoke his English very well, but he loved American music. So I grew up listening to Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Al Jolson, everything, plus a lot of classical music, Chopin, Beethoven, Strauss, all that stuff from Appy, and it was a great legacy. But of course, I was born in '78, so I grew up on rock and as well. So I always had those two worlds, if you will, and I still got them because I still love the standards and Jerry Vale and all that stuff, but also love rock. But growing up, I would, and we're doing some name dropping there with Bruce Springsteen saying growing up, but growing up, I my bands were. I got into Springsteen later in life, which is kind of funny. But my big bands were when I was a kid, the Rolling Stones. Still love the Rolling Stones. The Beatles, always loved the Beatles as a kid. Aerosmith, AC/DC, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, and then you kind of got the hair bands, Whitesnake, sort of a hair band, and that's a whole other issue. But so I was also into that era. So yeah, and then a little bit of rap, Run DMC, Raising Hell, which is an amazing album, Beastie Boys, as a kid and whatnot. So I was really all over the place with music. But my favorite when I was a kid was always the Rolling Stones. I love the Rolling Stones. I first got Steel Wheels on tape when it came out. I remember listening to Mixed Emotions or watching Mixed Emotions, the video on either MTV or VH1, and it really caught me onto the Stones. And I still worship the Rolling Stones. They're my probably my second favorite or third favorite band or singer.
Yeah, You mentioned that you got Bruce later in life. Can you remember when you
Sure.
first got aware of him, and what about him spoke to you?
That's a great question. So it's multi time. So when I was a kid, I bought Born in the USA, and I loved it. You know, all the songs, not just Born in the USA, Dancing in the Dark, My Hometown, songs like I'm Going Down, I'm on Fire is great, a Homebound Train, all these different no Retreat, No Surrender is just awesome. That's a great song. And if you don't like it, go to hell. You know what I mean?
So there is a rumor that
Yeah.
that's what's opening tonight.
I,
That,
I, I,
yeah, No Surrender. That's
oh, really?
I have heard that
So
rumor, because the thought is it would be Ghost or Morning Train, but
yeah.
since this isn't coming out till tomorrow, we're recording on
Oh,
Tuesday. That's the rumor I'm hearing.
yeah, so that would be an awesome one. I would love to see him, and you know, maybe do Loose Ends.
Yeah.
What's that song? Meet Me in the City,
Yes.
which is off the outtakes off the river, which is like a freaking awesome stadium rock song.
Oh,
That's awesome.
I,
Badlands would be a great opener
yeah.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you bought Born in the USA like
Oh,
everyone in the
Born
world.
in the USA when I
Uh-huh.
was a kid. And I just thought it was just a cool album. And it's funny, I remember being a kid and buying Born in the USA and then listening at a friend's house to the follow up, Tunnel of Love, and thinking it sucked. First, you got that record cover and he looks, you know, kind of whatever in a suit. You're like, what's up with that, man? But of course, I was too young to really appreciate it. And that's the awesome thing about Bruce is that he follows up albums like The River, which is such a rocking album in so many ways, with Nebraska, then Born in the USA with Tunnel of Love. He followed up The Rising with Devils and Dust and so on. That's really cool. So I would listen to him as a kid. I remember buying Born to Run, really, really loving it, just being knocked out by She's the One night. Especially She's the One. That's awesome. But it really, so I was kind of a casual fan, like I am now about Tom Petty or one of those guys. But it really was in 2001 after when The Rising came out. I remember buying The Rising, and it clicked in me in terms of that Bruce Springsteen isn't just a rocker, right? That he's about a narrative about America. He's a narrative about values. He's a narrative about the kind of country that we are, the kind of country that we've been, the kind of country that we can be when it comes to treating people right and fighting for justice and equity in everyday working people. And The Rising, I saw it then, and I was like 23 years old. I saw it then as I see it now, which is a real solemn, respectful response to one of the greatest tragedies in American history, September 11th. And it just clicked with me. Songs like Into the Fire, such a song about heroism. You're Missing, the Rising, which is an amazing song. Lonesome Day. I always love Skin to Skin. I think that's a great song. Or just tons of Nothing Man that I talked about in the article. I always thought Nothing Man was about a humble first responder, and when I reread it for the article, it's about a numb first responder, a person who's numb to the trauma they've seen on the job, a cop or a firefighter. So after that, just clicked, and I was like, I love this guy, and all of my values as a person were really personified in Bruce Springsteen. It was like, you know, he's patriotic. He loves our country. He's a patriotic guy, but he understands that our country is a work in progress and that we got to work to making America better. And that it's a challenge. And he talks about our challenges in his songs, whether it's workers, whether it's civil rights issues, war and peace issues, whatever it may be, he talks about that. So it really clicked with me. Then I went to see him in concert for the first time. I think it was in 02 or 03 here in Tampa when he toured for The Rising. And dude, I was smitten. And then when Devils and I love the guy. And then Darkness on the Edge of Town. I bought that. I bought The River, and I was like, where has this been all my life? I loved it. Then came out Devils and Dust, which I'm a big fan of. Not Reno, but the rest of the album, I'm a big fan of that. And Devils and Dust, what's that song? Long Time Coming. I
Yeah.
love that. That's a beautiful song about fatherhood. So it was just something where it just clicked with me, like in my early 20s, where I went from being a casual fan, like, yeah, Bruce is cool, to being like, I really get this guy, and I think he gets my values. And so many stories I could tell you about. I could take on forever about relationships that have started with people from Bruce Springsteen songs. And I'll talk about one later, but I remember like one time I'm an attorney and had a case with an opposing counsel, and he was just a jerk. God love him. He was. And I found out he was from Jersey. And one day after a deposition, and I'm a nice guy. I always tend to be a nice lawyer. And he pulls up in his car and he sees that I got a Bruce Springsteen sticker on my car. And he goes, "You like Bruce?" And I go, "Hell yeah." And we became friends afterwards. Bruce Springsteen's one of those things like Rocky. I'm also a big Rocky fan.
Yeah.
That it's just about values, and people get one another. When you say I'm a Bruce Springsteen fan, it's not necessarily political. It's about values, and so that's my journey.
Well, I love that. I am very similar, Councilman, because
Mm-hmm.
I was a casual fan, like I was 19, 20 when The River came out, bought that, like everyone else bought it in the USA, but then kind of drifted. And then after 9/11, where they did that tribute concert, right, where they did the telethon, and you had the E Street Band doing My City of Ruins, parts of them. And my first show was in Dallas during the Rising tour. And I joke that there's two kinds of people: the people that go to their first Bruce show that go, "Wow, that was long."
Yeah.
And then the rest of us that go, "Oh my goodness, when can I do this again?" Right?
Amen.
Yes, absolutely. I love that journey. I also have a lot of respect for Devils and Dust because that was my second show. And it was
That was
like, yeah, and it was just him and his guitar and the keyboard. So pretty interesting.
mm-hmm.
Um, I love the idea that you're talking about. It isn't just politics. It is the values of hard work and trying to, and he's talked about it, right? The gap between the American dream and the American reality and trying
Mm-hmm.
to match that. Um, how how has that affected you mentioned, becoming friends with opposing counsel. How has it affected your work and both as an attorney and as a councilman?
Great question. Well, Bruce Springsteen, again, it's about values, and it's not necessarily about politics. It shouldn't be. And I get it.
Right.
Bruce is more liberal. He's a Democrat, but it shouldn't be. I got a lot of good friends who are Republicans. I happen to be a Democrat who love Bruce Springsteen, and they hold their nose at some of his stuff. But whatever. It's about the working class, the hands that built America, to quote you two, and that's what Bruce Springsteen's about. So he certainly has just informed so much of my life, including with those albums. Devils and Dust, the song Devils and Dust is such a beautiful post 9/11 song. It could be Iraq, it could be Afghanistan, on somebody that goes off to war, and they go in with the greatest of ideals. Like, all of our soldiers are amazing, patriotic Americans with the highest aspirations, and they get there and they're like, what's going on? You know what I mean? It's such a great, it's just an amazing song. Magic, for me, all the songs, all of these post 9/11 albums, for the most part, exemplify a time. Magic was kind of an angry album during the height of George W. Bush. And it expressed a lot of frustration in our great country. It really, really did. Magic is like an amazing album. Working on a Dream, President Obama comes in. It's more of a bouncy, Queen of the Supermarket, Kingdom of Days, in that is beautiful. That could be somebody's wedding song. That's such a beautiful, beautiful song, album and whatnot. And then Wrecking Ball is just awesome. I mean, that is like the workers album to me. That is AFL-CIO, Walter Reuther, workers album. I love that. So it really has influenced that, and it really has, because so many of the stories. I'll give you a good example.
Please.
I recently worked on with some friends here in Tampa. There's a group called the Equal Justice Initiative that goes throughout our United States and tries to get markers dealing with a history of racial lynchings in counties. And Florida had the highest per capita rate of lynchings after Reconstruction to the 1930s. And I kind of led the effort along with a couple of other wonderful people for that. And the song I kept on going back to is "We Are Alive" from Wrecking Ball. That song is so beautiful about American history and how it comes alive for people. Not coming alive in like a Disney sense, but coming alive in terms of the voices that we don't know about. You know, the people that are out there again in the crossing the desert, the civil rights worker who was beaten. Kind of, it reminded me a lot of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman in Philadelphia, Mississippi, that when they found their bodies in Mississippi Delta, they found the bodies of like 5 or 6 other Black folks who they didn't even know were missing because nobody cared, right? Because nobody cared, and they were looking for Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, and that's kind of like We Are Alive. So We Are Alive really helped out a lot in my own mind with the racial lynching marker. It was about somebody who nobody cared about, and a gentleman named Robert Johnson, who was lynched in January of 1934, and nobody cared about. And that song really speaks to me. That's like a song that really speaks to me.
You know, one of the things that I love is American Land. And I'm curious because with your background, right?
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking of this, and I promise we won't get too political, but when I see all the posts and the social media about border crises and
Mm-hmm.
immigration, and I think of that line, the hands that build America, they're trying to keep out.
Oh,
right?
yeah. And that's true. And I love American Land is like the coolest. Number one, it plays a lot on he's Italian Irish. It plays a lot in his Irish side. And America loves the Irish. I've always said
yes,
that.
They
We
do.
love
Yes.
Irish. I got an Irishman behind me, John Kennedy.
Yes, I see that. Yes.
America loves the Irish. So it kind of plays on that, but it plays on the idea that today's person that's keeping somebody out as a refugee is yesterday's refugee. My family, we were refugees 63 years ago to this country, and I never forget that. I work a lot with refugees, and I think about American Land, and how, you know, America, this is a central theme in Bruce's records, which is America is like a ladder. You climb up that ladder, and once you get up on that ladder, you don't just stop and you don't just enjoy the view. You help somebody else climb up the ladder that was in your shoes 50, 60 years ago. And so I always tell people, the Muslims of today, or the folks who are maybe the Muslims of today that were trying to keep Muslims out of the United States from Syria, when you had all the mess over there that continues, are the Italians of 120 years ago, or the Irish of 100 years ago.
They truly are, aren't they?
Yeah, or the Cubans of 60 years ago, or hell, the Cubans of 60 days ago. So people, that's another big Bruce idea, is that as Americans, we can't forget where we come from, you know, and so that's a big narrative in his albums.
You know, that's one of the best compliments growing up in the South is saying, or insults is, you know, he forgot where he came from, is a bad insult from the South, or he doesn't forget his raisins, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that, and I love the idea that we're singing about that. I was lucky enough last year, and this was so odd, Louis. I had a member of parliament join me for
Awesome.
he tweeted how he was a Bruce fan. I did the same thing I did with you.
Yeah.
He joined me, and it was so interesting that this member of parliament joining me, telling me about how Bruce's music influenced his conscience and his social style. And I do think that we're trying to be kind, and there is a lot of anger out there, and there's a lot of anger among people that are afraid or just angry. And I do think that, you know, like when he did the Super Bowl commercial and he talked about the middle, someone said, this tells you how far away we are from the middle, is how the far right and the far left were both so mad at Bruce about that commercial.
Yep. And I'm glad he did that. I mean, because Bruce to me, I can't pin down his politics, because there's many different factions. There's traditional liberal Democrats, left of center Democrats, there's progressives, there's hard left. If I had a bet, he's probably just a traditional liberal Democrat. He's a Bobby Kennedy Democrat with some progressive pulses here and there. I don't think he's a hard left guy, and I think more than anything, he knows that we're an exceptional, great country. And that's the heart, in my opinion, of traditional post-World War II liberalism, which is that we are a great country, but we have to finish the job that was begun. That every generation, I mean, if you look at starting with our founding fathers, every generation has had the duty of bringing in more Americans. Started off just white guys owning land. Then it was all white guys under Andrew Jackson. Then eventually we got to, dealing with slavery to a degree after the Civil War, 19th Amendment and women, immigrants, and so forth and so on. And Springsteen, again, his songs sing about that journey, which is a patriotic journey.
I often think that American land is what some people think Born in the USA is.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Oh man.
You know.
Yeah. I should send you an article. I wrote an article 8 years ago in the then Tampa Tribune on Born in the USA, which is actually my favorite Springsteen song. And we can talk about that later if that's a question. But
Sure.
I'm a big fan of that song.
Tell me, go ahead. I'll jump ahead. What about that song speaks to you?
Oh man. I mean, for me, I was born in 1978. So I was born 3 years after the fall of Saigon. And we all grew up under the specter of Vietnam. It was the member at the family table of America that we didn't talk about. Like the kid that ran away. We don't talk about Bobby, right? It was kind of like that. Vietnam always has been. And when Born in the USA was written, I think it was 1985. I think it came out in, if memory serves me right. It was about 10 years down the road after Vietnam. And it wasn't just about that guy who got in trouble, gave him a gun in his hand, sent him off to Saigon, got into a lot of trouble, came back home, couldn't get help at the VA, got arrested, and now he's in a penitentiary. It was about everybody. It's about the debt that we owe to our Vietnam veterans. It's a reckoning. It's an American reckoning with what our country did to our heroic Vietnam veterans, the greatest of their generations, people who grew up in an America that we idealized, Buddy Holly's America, Mickey Mantle's America, Chuck Berry's America, and would come home to that America that would yell at them, that would demonize them, that called them baby killers. And we failed them. We failed them 110%, not just in terms of our cultural response, including a lot of people on the hard left, by the way, and to hell with those people. But we failed them, and also in the economy. I think that I'm 45 years old, and some guy that went off to Nam and came back and was 20 years old in 1972 would have been my age when Bill Clinton got elected president. It's amazing. Had his whole living a whole life, 20 years, 25 years after Nam. God willing, has 30, 40 years left after that. And that experience forever changed them when they were 18 and 19. And it wasn't just what they went through in Nam, it was what they experienced when they came home.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of things that we have not gotten right, but it feels that we tend to separate the politics of a unpopular war and away from the military soldiers. And I know it sounds almost rote, thank you for your service, but I do think the majority of people, when they say that, they mean it. I know that my father was, did a tour in Vietnam, was involved with, before he went, he was training people on map reading and other things to go to Vietnam. And when he didn't like talking about it.
Sure.
But when my mom would say the guy who came back from Vietnam was not the guy who went.
Of course, yeah.
And she also, and when he did say, he said the only thing good for him is that he had a group of buddies. They were all instructors, and they ended up sending them, like, for the longest time, the commanders at their post was like, no, we're not going to send these people because they're better served teaching. But when they reached the point, so Dad said that they had a group of people that all went overseas together and came back together. So he said, I didn't have any of that because I had a group with me to support, versus being alone in a bus station or an airport in military uniform. Yeah. And I do, I think one of the most powerful moments is when I was lucky enough to go to Bruce on Broadway, and when before he sings Born in the USA, he talks about going to the draft board and
Yep.
saying, I wonder who went in my place.
Yep.
And I think that is a powerful statement. And I do think that for that generation, you mentioned it is their shadow. It
Oh yeah.
is something that they always think and remember.
Oh yeah, it is. And it's something. And again, those people today are 70, 75 years old.
Yep.
And Bruce has always been a champion of Vietnam veterans. Some of his
Yes.
songs, I mean, so just a couple off the top of my head that I love. What Shut Out the Light is awesome. That song is beautiful. Talks about the sheiks. They used to call it PTSD after World War One. And then I love Brothers Under the Bridge from Tracks. That song is beautiful. I mean, if you don't cry and listen to that song, then I pity the fool.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful song. But Born in the USA is just an amazing song. I really, really love that song. It's very overplayed but underappreciated, like I said in the article. It's a great song, and people got to listen to it because it's easy to go. I lived during the early George W. Bush years where if you ever criticize Iraq, people would start drowning out with USA, USA.
Right.
And we got to realize that when that ends, we got men and women coming home with injuries that they're going to have, whether mental or physical, that they're going to have for life. And when we're done chanting USA, USA, they're still going to be dealing with those issues. And Vietnam's a perfect example of that. But the big thing again with Vietnam is that people came home and they were heroes and they were treated as outcasts. Things that you should have been damn proud to do, to wear your country's uniform. They were meant to feel outcast. And the worst part is they were kids. They were 18, 20, 21-year-old kids. My son is 16 years old. Imagine somebody 2 years older than he coming back home in New York City or Chicago or wherever and being told that they're a monster and they had their whole lives ahead of them. And all they were doing is trying to do the right thing. And most of them, many of them, not all, but many were middle class, working class, blue collar, lower income kids. And a lot of the kids yelling at them were from college on their way to that nice accounting job. So again, we really messed up on Vietnam and when it comes to our veterans, and Springsteen really captures that best.
I absolutely agree. Going back just a little bit, lighten our mood just a little, though I've loved this discussion. I always like to preference the amount of times you've seen Bruce live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are.
I know, right?
But do you count? And if so, how many shows?
So yes, I've seen, let's see, I saw him in The Rising, Devils and Dust. I saw Working on a Dream. I saw Magic. I saw Wrecking Ball. I saw him during the River Tour when he did the anniversary of the River. That was in South Florida.
Okay.
So this will be my seventh.
Okay.
I believe it'll be my seventh time seeing Bruce Springsteen, which I think most. I've seen Willie Nelson like 5 times, I think 5 or 6 times.
Okay.
But this will be my most I've seen.
Very nice. Are you bringing your son?
Oh yeah, my wife. And my wife appreciates Springsteen. She was probably me 30 years ago, and so some, but they know it's a big deal for me. So we'll be there and are really, really looking forward to it because he's again just such a cool dude.
That's good. Have you gotten a fair amount of response from your column?
Yeah, it seems so. I mean, I saw something on Facebook that just my tweet alone on it got something like 20,000 views. And my aide was telling me that we got some emails back on it, which is interesting. So I knew it would get a good response because if you know me as an elected official or just as a person, I always just come from the heart. I tell people if I'm not talking about an issue, it's because I'm not passionate about it. And if I'm talking about it, it's because I'm passionate about it. And I'm damn passionate about Bruce Springsteen. Because it's not like, for example, the Rolling Stones. I love the Rolling Stones. Let It Bleed. There is no better opening than Gimme Shelter, right?
Right.
But it's not about values. The Stones are awesome, but I wish them all well and they're amazing. But it's not about values. Springsteen is about values. By the way, so's Willie Nelson or Chris Christopherson. They're like really cool dudes.
Yeah.
But Springsteen to me is the king of all that. He is to me Bob Dylan meets Chuck Berry meets a true blessing from our God Almighty. He's a
Yeah,
good dude.
absolutely. Um, is there any song? Well, let's talk about, you've already talked about Born in USA, and you've actually covered a lot of songs and albums. Are there
Mhm.
others that what do you think of Letter to You and the new Soul
That
cover?
that's a great question. So his recent albums, I love them. I think Western Stars is an amazing album. I really really love it. There's I think the live, is it the live? He has two versions out, and there's one with
Yeah,
Ryan Cowboy,
yeah,
which is kind
yeah.
of cool for him to cover. But that's like really cool album, and he's kind of developed like a bit of a Western Southern twang, and so that's an album that really kind of it embraces that a little bit. So
Mhm.
I love Western Stars. I think that's a great album. You know, Letter to You is amazing. The song Letter to You is really really good. I'll See You in My Dreams. That's like that should be a classic Bruce Springsteen standard. It goes without saying. I think that's just an amazing one. And then the new soul one, I love it. Don't play that song for me. I believe it is.
Yeah.
A bunch of those songs, really, really good stuff. So I got them all on record, and in fact, it's funny because I'm a vinyl guy. I mean,
Okay.
I music, but I have here. I pulled out because I have all of my vinyls in my city council office. So you're seeing West Stars, which is a great.
Yes.
I love it. Then the River, which is
Yes.
that's. I mean, Drive All Night doesn't get any better than
No, it
that.
doesn't.
Obviously, The Rising, I
Yeah,
got
there you go.
on a Dream. Gotta love that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got to have Born to Run,
Yes.
Born in the USA, Devils and Dust. Gotta love that. And Wrecking Ball. And then another album that is one of my favorites is Tunnel of Love. That's
So,
beautiful, beautiful.
so you mentioned a young Lewis
Hmm.
went to, had heard Born in the USA and then heard
Yeah.
Tunnel of Love and went, what's this? I
Yep.
always say that you need to have your heart broken a couple of times or been in a long relationship before you will get Tunnel to Love. What are your
Oh,
thoughts?
Tunnel of Love is such a blessing because it's a guy who's going through in his life like a breakup and an identity crisis where he's out of focus, and he writes a song starting off with the song Ain't Got You. It tells a lot. Tougher Than the Rest is just such a cool challenge song in a relationship. But for me, like Two Faces is really really good. Valentine's Day is ends on such a hopeful note, but for me there's two really special songs, and I'm going off this stuff on memory, by the
I
way.
can
I don't.
tell. Yes.
Yeah, I for me it's One Step Up. I love that song. And then Walk Like a Man, different song. So One Step Up is I've been married for 2 years, and I was divorced when I was in my early 30s. So that album really really spoke to me in a very unique way. And so did the song Darkness on the Edge of Town during that time. It's such a cool song about finding your inner, just going to that place that you never knew existed. But One Step Up, I remember the part where it goes, there's a girl across the bar. I get the message she's sending. She ain't looking to marry me. I'm just pretending. Last night I dreamed I held you in my arms. The music was never ending. And it's so true, because when you're breaking up with somebody after a long time, you want to stay together with them and you dream about them, but it's just not going to happen, even though you want to go with that girl across the bar because you want to have nothing but a good time, like everybody does.
Sure.
So it's a very human song. And then Walk Like a Man, when my dad died in 2012, I really got, again, it just hit me. And I really really, and I love about the first line about holding his dad's hand. It's such a great song. Talks about going to church as a young kid and all these things. It's a really really good song. So Tunnel of Love for me is awesome. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan. It's not and it's got what Brilliant Disguise,
Yeah.
which is great. That's an awesome song. And that's
Yeah.
one of the more radio friendly songs in that album. But that's like a really cool album. I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't get it, whatever.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Um, are there, do you have kind of a mental list of songs you're hoping to hear tonight?
That's a good question. So, I mean, there's always the fun ones. Darkness on the Edge of Town is always so much fun to him for him to play and whatnot. I always Loose Ends. I think that's such a cool song.
Cool.
Me City is another one. That's the amazing thing about this dude is that his outtakes. What's that album? It's got oh my gosh, the Message, or what's that one? It's a two dub, not
The
tracks, but
Promise. Yeah, The Promise.
what?
The
Yeah,
Promise.
amazing. I mean, songs like that are just it's amazing. But for me, I'd love to see some songs from that album. But Loose Ends, and he did play Brothers Under the Bridge. I think during Wrecking Ball or during Magic. I don't remember, Working on a Dream, but I'd love to see him again play that song and explain what it is and whatnot. And it'll be interesting. I was talking about this with a reporter, which is playing in Florida, and this is political, and I'm just going to say it objectively, which is we're in a very acute state. We have a governor who's some people call him America's governor. Some people say he could be the next president of the United States. Governor DeSantis. And regardless of what you think about him, you wonder if Springsteen's going to sing anything that kind of talks about, maybe he does sings "We Are Alive" and talks about, what he views as attacks on history. Maybe he sings 41 Shots. Who knows?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
be
It's hard for me to criticize living in Texas with Governor Abbott. Yeah, there just seems to be to quote Bruce, there's just a meanness in this world. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think not everyone, but some of the people across the aisle have this meanness to them that I don't understand. I don't understand this not wanting to be there for people. So yes, it will be interesting. And because you see those people on Facebook. Oh, will you vacation in Florida? I'm like, yes, I'm not going to hold that. I'm not going to hold
What?
against the whole state.
I
Right.
tell Well, I mean, in general, eat where you want to eat, live where you want to live, love who you want to love, and stuff like that. It's like,
Yeah.
I can tell you all as a Floridian, this is an amazing state. I love Florida with all my heart. This was the state that in 1960 helped welcome my parents and grandparents when they were refugees from Cuba and didn't speak much English. We're a great state. We are, and we're not this right-wing bastion. We're actually, our people as a whole are actually pretty moderate. We're not liberal. We're not conservative. We're actually pretty darn moderate. We've just had a political party that has done a wonderful job in their own terms of accumulating power. And it is what it is. But Florida's actually, we're a really cool state. It's a great state to live in. I'm a cheerleader. And Texas is freaking awesome. I mean, Texas.
Yes.
Texas is the ultimate hoorah, pound your chest, the American spirit, American, don't tread on me. And I don't mean it in the recent sense.
Yeah.
I mean that whole idea of, tell you what, Willie Nelson is all Texas, because Willie Nelson is a good Christian. He's also a bit of a hippie. He's a redneck. He's everything. And that's the Texas spirit, which is, let me lead my life. If I want to be a born again Christian, or if I want to be an atheist or whatever, let me lead my life because I'm an American and I'm free. That's Willie Nelson. And that's Texas.
It is. And I agree with you. There is nothing wrong with Willie Nelson. There is you hear so many stories about how kind he's been to people.
Yep.
And how good he is and how he speaks the truth, and it just, yeah, him and Chris Christopherson, right? I agree. Those are, you talk about great songwriters.
Chris is the man. I worship. And by the way, his politics, he's very much so to the left of me. He's hard left.
Yeah.
But there's no greater American who stands for his ideals and has got the gravitas and the cojones to back it up. Chris Christopherson, he's the man. I love him.
Yes. All right. Before I've kept you, and I really appreciate the time. Before I get to the Mary question, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. I people always there's certain places where you always get like special things and special things happen. And I'm not comparing this to that, but I always take my son most every year to Arlington National Cemetery. It's a holy place, and we do like a
Hmm.
3 or 4 hour walk. Go to section 60. It's amazing. The heroes that are buried there. And that quote Bruce Springsteen, "We are alive." And I always meet people there it's just unique and special. And I also find that at a Bruce Springsteen concert. Again, I'm not comparing the two, just for the record, in
I
case
know
there's
what
ever
you're saying. Yes.
a campaign against me. But in Bruce Springsteen, I remember like being younger and waiting in line at Magic for floor tickets and talking to a dude ahead of me. He was a Rocky fan. He loved Springsteen. He was in a labor union, I think an electrical worker. But the best Springsteen moment I ever had was I'm an attorney and I would take a lot of depositions. Now I'm a part-time lawyer, so I'm an elected official. But there's a guy who's I'm gonna see at the concert, Mick, who's a good guy. Mick's like a good dude, and he was a third generation Marine who's a Vietnam veteran. Went to Vietnam, signed up as a kid to go to Vietnam because that's what his dad did. That's what his granddad did, and and I'll get to his story in a bit. But I knew Mick as he was a videographer for depositions, and he was smaller dude. I mean, he could probably kick my butt, but a smaller guy always wears a Vietnam veteran hat. We talk, and just talk. Well, I saw him at a Springsteen concert with his then girlfriend, now wife Rita, and we really connected that night. And because of that, I wrote in a little bit the Born in the USA column in the Tampa Tribune, and we really, really became good friends. And he's a big Springsteen fan, and we connected after knowing one another in depositions at Bruce Springsteen. And Mick's story, it's like Born in the USA in some ways, which is he goes off to Nam. He's never talked to me about what happened there, but he goes off to Nam. He's in combat, and he gets back home, and he's met by protesters and people who are just protesting, demonizing him, etc. He kind of goes off, as I recall, to San Francisco. For the longest time isn't proud of his outwardly made to be not proud of his service because of the terrible things that people do, etc. But in time, he comes home and he becomes at peace with his service and is damn proud today to be a Vietnam veteran. And he's damn proud to be an American. He's damn proud to be a Bruce Springsteen fan. So connecting with Mick at a concert, that's what happens at Springsteen concerts is people connect. It's a really cool place.
I had a friend who said, with all apologies, and especially with you're there in Florida, with all apologies to Disney World, the happiest place on earth is a Bruce Springsteen concert.
Amen.
Right.
It
And
is.
so, it just, there is. And you're right. There is that feeling of the anticipation of going there, and you're all in this group event, and the anticipation of what's he going to play, what's he going to do, and you're happy with everything. So that is great.
It also the friends you make. Like I got a buddy of mine, John McCloskey, who I met him when he was married to a person I used to work with at a law firm, and we just immediately clicked because of being a Bruce Springsteen fans together and whatnot. So many different people with whom I just clicked because of Bruce Springsteen. It's always a great thing.
Yes. So I'm going to let you go, but before I do, I end every podcast with the Mary question. So Jay Armstrong, speaking of a great guy, is recently retired for medical reasons, but he was a high school English teacher. And he would take the song Thunder Road and would break it apart for his seniors.
Mm-hmm.
They would go through all the lyrics. They would talk about the imagery, the words Bruce chose, the themes he explores. And at the end of the 2 days, he would ask his class, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road? Councilman, that is your question.
Well, that's a great question. I think she does. But then what happens in their life is probably the heartache of America's working class and what they've been through in the last 45 years with a war on workers, a war on working families, a war on their unions, deindustrialization, the race to the bottom in wages and worker safety. So she probably got in there, but things were a little bit rough, and maybe some of those songs that Tunnel of Love kind of played into the relationship years later. But I think she gets in. The beautiful thing about that song, it's about a couple that's obviously taking their hits, right, in the badlands of life, but that they find love, they find peace, they find harmony, and they find optimism together. And that to me is what Thunder Road is about, is that you ain't a beauty, but hey, you're all right. That there's magic in the night, and there's magic that we bust our butts at work, and we have tough times, maybe don't get along with our parents, whatever it is, but that there's moments of magic, and you find that in young love. And that to me is what Thunder Road's about.
I love it. I love it. If someone wants to reach you, how can they?
Great question. So I can be reached at luis.viera@tampagov.net. And I think our phone number is 813-274-7073, I believe it is.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll be glad to engage, especially with Bruce fans.
I love it. Thank you, sir. Enjoy the show. I will, like I said, I'm counting down till he's in Dallas. So I'm looking forward to it. You have a great time. Listeners, I hope everyone who's going to Tampa tonight, have a great time. Enjoy, hug the person next to you, and just appreciate the fact that we are getting the E Street Band live again. And that's a great thing. Thank you, Louis. Thank you, listeners.
Yes.
We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.